I'm in my room. My is on in front of me with my microphone. There's a notepad open with some notes about my podcast. It's time to rewind. It looks like they're open to the seventh scene of Memento that starts in color at 11 minutes and 44 seconds, with Leonard trying to wipe Remember Sammy Jankis off of his hand, and ends at 16 minutes and 50 seconds, with Leonard writing Kill Him on the back of a Polaroid. There also seems to be a Skype window open. Hang on. Who is this?
Bubba! This is Eric Deutsch, your co-host.
Oh, I prefer to be called Bubbawheat. And who are you?
And I'm Chris Nelson.
Well, it's good to have you here, and this is like I said, this is the seventh scene in Memento. This is another color scene, and before we jump into this scene, Chris, why don't you go ahead and take just a moment and let us know your background with Memento? Like, do you remember when you first saw this movie?
So I do. I would have been just turning 13 when the movie came out. And I know I wouldn't have seen it in theaters, but I'm pretty sure I saw it on home video shortly after that. Like, my mom was always a big movie person, and you know, that would be something that she would be like, oh, this is a cool new movie. This is it's done very differently, that kind of thing. So I definitely would have seen it sometime in, late 2000 when I was about 13. And it was obviously would have been the first Nolan movie I had ever seen. And I've seen most of them since. So yeah, no, I was blown away the first time I saw it.
Yeah, 13. It sounds pretty young to me. Did you watch a lot of R-rated movies whenever you were younger? I mean, I know that this isn't like super R-rated. There's a little bit of violence and some swearing.
Yeah, I did. I would say kind of being on my own a lot. Like, my mom would work, and I lived only with her, so I kind of had a lot of time to myself after school. So, like, if there's just a Pulp Fiction VHS lying around, that kind of, got watched eventually. And what kind of effect that had on me as a human being, I don't know, but that's what it is.
I did not get into, a lot of the R-rated movies until I was an older teenager, for sure. I couldn't imagine wrapping my head around this movie at 13.
Well, I didn't say I got it all. I didn't say that. I'm still not sure I get it all. I think I do. But yeah, no. I watched plenty of our movies in my days. So that was, it's always just something that I did. So I think I turned out all right.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into this scene. And so this starts off with Leonard seeing the tattoo like it's the first time, as he tries to wash it off. And we get the internal monologue of him saying, "Remember Sammy Jankis?" But we don't get that story just yet. And then he starts looking for more tattoos and sees the fact tattoos on his forearm, but he gets interrupted before he even, gets to fact one, as somebody jumps into opens the restroom door, and Leonard immediately goes into trying to act like a normal person.
This is confusing to me that he does this, because the scene clearly is setting it up that he doesn't realize he is covered in tattoos. This is, as the viewer, this is our first being told for the first time that he's got tattoos. We see Remember Sammy Jankis. We see the word "the facts," which, by the way, where the place it's tattooed in the front of his wrist. I don't have any tattoos, but that seems like a location that would hurt a lot to get a tattoo, by the way.
It does. Can verify.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. But why does he stop looking? Is he embarrassed that someone walks in? He doesn't even know that the tattoos are there. He doesn't know why he has them. So it's interesting to me that he does stop looking, and that he does seem to have some sort of like, I shouldn't be looking at this right now while this guy is walking in the bathroom.
Yeah, I think it's like a sense of him trying to be as normal as possible.
No, I almost feel like too that he gets distracted easily in a lot of these situations, which I think is kind of a big flaw in his system, right? Which is, like, Like, I think later on in one of our other scenes, he's, someone's like, you should write that down. And he's like, oh, yeah. And then he pulls out a picture of Natalie, and then he gets distracted. It's like, well, you didn't write that down. So I think it's kind of one of these falls. And I feel like that is one of the questions I have about the movie still is, and I don't know is it a plot hole? Is it intentional? What he remembers and conditions himself to understand of things that happen post injury, because he clearly doesn't always need a full refresher every time his memory resets, right? It's just kind of strange. Like, he seems to still have some basis for what's going on. Like, it's not like he reads through his file every time. So it's just kind of an interesting way the movie works.
Yeah, it's like he has the conditioning that he trains himself. And we even see that as he starts to walk out of the bathroom, he goes and grabs for his Polaroids as he's walking back into the restaurant and trying to regain his bearings before the waiter comes up to him and basically saves the day for him. And I do love that. I feel like there's a lot of subtle acting that Guy Pearce does. Just the way that, it's him trying to act normal. He has a very neutral expression through most of this movie, really. And I'm going to bring that up again, a few points later. But just the way that you see him basically casing the room as he walks out, and you can almost hear the internal monologue of him trying to figure out, okay, I'm in a restaurant. Have I finished eating? Have I paid? All this is kind of running through his mind until the waiter comes up to him.
Yeah, I agree. Great face acting by him here. There's definitely I'm not really sure where I am at this exact moment, but I don't want anyone to know that I'm not exactly sure where I am, and I've got to figure this out quickly, like I always do.
Yeah, Guy Pearce. I think the Guy Pearce is just great in this movie. This would have been the first thing I ever saw him in, and it's weird because I've seen him do what the things I would consider not great, from a performance standpoint, and I've seen things like this where I think he's just absolutely perfect in this role. I love it.
And it's something that you don't notice unless you're looking closely, but I think you could miss and think that the discount in Polaroid was handed to him with the packet and the keys. You can catch that he did pull that from his pocket and he sets it on top of the envelope before he looks on the back and asks where Lincoln Street is. That they're very careful with the type of words that Leonard uses, because the waiter's like, oh, it's easy, let me just tell you, and Leonard's like, trust me, I need to write this down. And I think the trust me in that is very important and very specific, because this is still pretty early in the movie, and they want the audience to trust the character, even though he's, we find out through the course of the movie that he's very much not trustworthy.
And not only is he not trustworthy, but trust the people he does trust as we work our way through the movie changes with good reason. And ultimately, what does he really trust is his tattoos, frankly, is the only thing he really trusts, that he really should trust. And that he also, at the same time, paradoxically shouldn't trust, because some of those tattoos are 100% false.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into the tattoos
later
on in this scene.
Yeah, it's just a mess of a system, honestly. He's so, yeah, I'll save some for the next episode we talk, but he's so reliant on, he values these things so much, these quote unquote facts that he thinks he knows. And it's just such a messy system to watch.
This is also one of those things that you get these things that happen sometimes in movies and TV shows that then as time moves on, technology comes around, that you can watch it in hindsight and say, boy, that could never happen now. The whole exchange with the waiter here, where the waiter's giving him directions and he says, trust me, I need to write this down. And the waiter's talking so fast, I think anyone would need to write it down. But this is one of those things with modern cell phones and GPS, you don't even need this scene because the waiter's just he already has the address and you're just punching it in your GPS and you're leaving. And it would be a missed opportunity then in this specific movie to establish more of what is going on by not having the trust me, I need to write this down.
Mm-hmm. And I also love the nice little subtle clue that we get that kind of shows how Leonard is able to function like driving because you can see that he's holding his Polaroids, and we don't really get a good look at the directions, but I imagine he's also holding the directions to get to the hotel in front of him the entire drive there. So that way, that helps him keep his focus while he's driving, so he always knows where he's going next.
Yeah, not the safest way to drive, but yeah.
I mean, he does even more unsafe things while driving later on, so he's not the best at it.
And then he gets to his room, and we get to see what I've decided to call his memory map. And we don't get the best look at it. We just get, we kind of get a long shot, and it's this, it's not quite full on crazy guy with the notes and the strings attached all over the place, but it's not too far removed from that.
Yeah, it's like the ancestor of that.
Yeah, there's I counted a total of 21 pictures around the edge after he puts the ones that he had in his pocket on there. And, there's a lot of hand-drawn lines that represents the main roads here in this town that goes to the main spots. As we see him tack up the Discount Inn, we do see the spot that he has labeled for Ferdy's Bar. And he puts his car in the car slot, and he puts Natalie and Teddy right next to each other, which... they're not necessarily labeled, but you imagine that that's his spot for his acquaintances. And there's also, several different Post-it notes and scraps of paper attached in various places too.
So is the whole thing, would you say the whole thing is a literal map, or some of it is also just like grouping and listing things? Because I didn't look at it that closely, but it actually makes me wonder something about that.
Yeah, I get the impression that it's a rough map. Like, I imagine, it's not to scale and maybe not 100% accurate, but basically, like, I look at it as all of the lines are like the main roads in this town.
Okay, because the one thing I thought of when I saw the sheet was like, what, he puts a picture of his car in the car slot, and so to your point, if it's a map, maybe he just moves that around the map wherever his car actually is at this moment. But then, because I thought it was just like, that's what his car looks like. I thought it was just a place where his car goes on the page, which to me, that kind of is one of the flaws in his system, right? Like, why doesn't he wonder why he didn't have a picture of his car there before? I don't know. So
I get the impression that, whenever he like parks in his home base in whatever apartment or hotel room that he's staying in, where he has this map, he'll put his car photo up there, and then anytime he leaves, he pulls the car photo down, so it's always with him.
Okay.
Yeah,
right,
he has to always have the Polaroid of his car with him because he never knows when he's going to forget which car is his.
Okay. All right. Plot hole averted. I like it. That makes sense.
And then he goes to look at this envelope that Natalie gave him with the driver's license and car registration. And you can also see there's a blue Post-it note on the page, which has driving instructions to the abandoned building that we see at the beginning and the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah, I love these little details that really shows how well crafted this movie is from start to finish. Because, pretty much any sort of little detail that you can see really ties into some other element of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone look into detail on the driver's license at all?
I sure did.
I did too. I wonder what you came up with.
Well, I came up with that 1219 Pine Street in San Francisco does not exist. There's a 1225 Pine Street in San Francisco, and there's a 1201, but there's no 1219.
Okay.
I also looked up Joe Pantoliano's actual height to see if he really is 5'10", because for some reason I always pictured Joe Pantoliano as a shorter guy, and I have no idea why. But apparently he has a book in which he does state he is 5'10", and interestingly enough, the website celebheights.com, which does not shock me at all, it exists, for some reason says that Joe Pantoliano is 5'9". So celebheights.com, not accurate information.
Yeah, that's what I Googled. What I Googled says 5'9", but that's probably it's probably Google pulling it from Celeb
Yeah,
Heights.
probably pulling from celebheights.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually listened to a podcast a while back that heavily featured Celeb Heights. It's basically this, like, you know, slightly comedy, but it's like an investigation podcast. And I think one of the first few episodes was this woman was trying to get to the bottom of what Jake Gyllenhaal's height actually was, because and she heavily referenced Celeb Heights, and there was like different information, and in the podcast she actually meets him and measures him in person, and it is great. I don't remember what the name of the podcast is, but it's a fantastic run, and I think it's stopped after only a handful of episodes, but the episodes that exist were really great, and that one was a highlight.
That's great. Eric, did you get anything else from the driver's license?
Just that Teddy's name is John Edward Gamble.
Okay, so I'll share a couple things I pulled from that, which is that it says he was born in 1957, but Joe Pantoliano was born in 1951. So kudos to him for believably playing someone 6 years younger than he was. Nailed it. I really believed he was in his early 40s. And then the other thing was the birth date given on his driver's license, I believe, was 12/9/57. And the only thing notable I could find about that date was that that's Donny Osmond's birthday. So I do with that what you will.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to look too much into that kind of stuff. So thank you both for doing that for me. And then again, right after, with this again brings in the concept of trust, and this time with the character of Teddy, because we know from the beginning of the movie that Leonard kills him, and here we see Leonard learning for at least the second time that Teddy's name is actually John G. And we get the reminder as he looks at the back of the Polaroid, the "Don't believe his lies."
One of the key, probably more famous written sentences from this movie.
And that really ties in to the fact that this calls into the question that Teddy is not a reliable character.
Right. I was going to say, I will say that one of the, he looks at the Polaroid, he sees how he wrote "Don't believe his lies," and then he starts thinking, and he says, wait a minute, said your name is Teddy. This here said his name is John. I will say, I'm going to give a bit of a no prize, look for a little bit of a no prize here. His name is John Edward Gamble, and Edward can be a name that people use Teddy as a nickname for. I mean, Ted Kennedy's name was Edward. So it's not a huge stretch if you have someone that prefers to use their middle name instead of their first name and then uses the nickname for that middle name. It's not inconceivable someone named John Edward Gamble would be known as Teddy.
Well, and he says later in the movie, he says, "My mother calls me Teddy," and I don't get the feeling like he's making that up. It probably is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm sure that's the case.
Yep.
Which, I mean, and based on the way the movie actually ends, like it's not as if Leonard actually really cares about the truth, right?
Right.
Kind of point.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Whatever fits.
Yeah, and throughout this movie, and we're going to talk about this more in the next episode that you're on, because we get a lot more Teddy there. But Teddy is really a fascinating character in this. I mean, really, almost all the characters are pretty interesting. I mean, Leonard is the main character, but Teddy is really interesting, and especially because we only get one small slice of who Teddy is. And Teddy has this whole entire, basically, backstory that we don't see.
I think he ends up being probably one of the more likable people in the movie, honestly. Not that it's a high bar, but
yeah, and then we get this brief conversation between Leonard and Tenny, which it's very short but very telling, because I think it's interesting. Leonard starts off by calling him Mr. Gamble, Mr. John Gamble, and he doesn't deny that his name is John Gamble, but he does correct him by saying it's Teddy, and then he immediately offers to come over, and I like Leonard's very, just very flippant off the cuff. Okay, I'll be waiting. It's just really, just the tone of it. It's so just offhanded.
Leonard, on a minute-to-minute basis sometimes in his life doesn't 100% know what to think, and so right now his brain is thinking of, this guy could be very, very important in what I'm trying to do, but I'm still not 100% sure what I'm trying to do. In the next few seconds of this scene, we're going to get, the very big reveal of the tattoos that at this point in time, he does not remember. So he wants John, Teddy, whoever to come over because he feels like he needs to confront him, but he's not 100% sure exactly why and about what.
Yeah. It's just this constant state of Leonard being in this like half-remembered fog and just going off of just what little pieces of information that he has seen in the past few minutes. And those pieces of information are not always the same pieces of information.
No, he's literally just grasping at like whatever he like first sees when his memory resets,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then after he hangs up, it's this really nice moment, and I think it's worth mentioning because, we get a good look that Leonard is still wearing his wedding ring, and I do think that that's significant in this movie. And Guy Pearce has a nice, I feel like it's a believable moment of rediscovering his tattoo on his forearm again, because, even though within this scene, we as the audience know that he just discovered his tattoos, but Leonard as a character is discovering his tattoos yet again for the first time. And that immediately goes into this audience reveal, and we, as the audience, get the first good look at pretty much all of his tattoos, or at least most of them, because there is one that they don't actually show on camera that, comes into play later on. It's very important in the black and white scenes.
No, I just was saying I tried to make out most of them, and it's interesting, that there's some are in reverse for the mirror and some are not. Probably more so just so the audience isn't looking at everything backwards, because that's a little too much. But
yeah, and I do have, I did list all of them that we can see in this moment. I'm
sure all three of us did.
The one that I'm going to save for later that we don't see is the never answer the phone.
Yeah.
This is the kind of shot that was made for a movie by minute website, a website podcast. Where just pause on that every few seconds and write down every single thing he's got tattooed on him, and then discuss it.
Either that or just Google and find a list that somebody else has already made. Where's the fun in that? Nah, that's no fun. But I did definitely take extra notes that they did not have on the list that I found, because I think that there are some important, aspects as far as placement and even font that just a straight list doesn't have. And we'll kind of quickly, the first one that we saw at the beginning of this is Remember Sammy Jankis on his hand. And, I think we're going to talk a lot about Sammy Jankis throughout this podcast. So we don't really have to go into that too much. And then the next one that I have on my list is, the find him and kill him. And, basically the big sash pattern across his chest.
that's the most prominent tattoo, right? It's in the most prominent spot. It's in a bigger font. It's in a noticeable font. That's and it's the most powerful sentence probably he's got on there as well.
Yeah, other than of course the mirrored one.
Right,
but,
which we don't have which we won't quite know what that is for about another minute or so.
I mean, and anybody who can read mirrored letters does see it, but it's, Leonard as a character does not see it yet.
Right.
And then the next one on my list on his left bicep is "She is gone," and right below that, "Time still passes." And this is one of a few of them that I think it's interesting because it is in two different fonts. And I also noticed, at least at this angle, it looks like the "she" in the "She is gone" it seems a little bit bolder than the rest of it. It's like it kind of starts bold and then goes a little bit thinner as it goes out. Almost like it's, more of an... I don't think it's like a self-done tattoo that we see later in the black and white scene, but it does seem like an amateur or maybe a rushed tattoo.
Yeah, and as we look at all of the tattoos also, you'll see that some of them are clearly professionally done. Some of them are clearly not professionally done. We find out, of course, later on why that is. And just, the choice of doing some in different fonts. I couldn't even tell the one "Time Still Passes." I was going to ask you two if you knew what that middle word was, because I just was staring at it and I saw "Time Something Passes," and I couldn't even make out because of the font that word was still.
Yeah, it's the "Time Still Passes" is in a very fancy Gothic font.
Yeah.
And so clearly that was done in two different sessions. And I do think it's interesting because I would imagine that the "She is gone" was a very, very early tattoo.
Yeah. When it's like he's probably in different mindsets when he's getting different tattoos, right? Like some of them are like, like "She is gone" almost sounds like move on, but then he clearly, most of the time doesn't want to move on. Like, and he's giving some tattoos he's giving to himself, some he's getting professionally done. And also, you guys just made me think, like, I'm real, because some of those tattoos are very big, probably took like a few hours, and I'm very curious, does he like lose his memory halfway through getting a tattoo, and then it's like, what is happening? And then he has to ask, like, wait, what are you writing? And he's like, okay, that makes sense, that checks out, keep going, it's fine. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, although lettering is generally an easier, quicker tattoo. I don't think any of these would take multiple hours. I think it may be the biggest one across his chest was maybe an hour and a half, if I had to guess. I've only had a couple tattoos, a few tattoos myself, and I haven't really had text done, but I don't think that most of these, and maybe the almost paragraph on his lower rib, because that's like 4 lines. The camera doesn't lie, notes can be lost, habit and routine, learn by repetition. Those are all in the same fonts. Those look like they may have been done in the same session.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one that I have on my notes is his other bicep, in bold, "Consider the source." And that's, bold letters and underlined. And then lower, much fainter, is "Memory is treachery."
I mean, boy, if that's a good, if that's not a great motto for this movie.
Yeah.
I love the "consider the source" concept, though, because, I guess he can do that on the surface when he gets some information from a source. But at the end of the day, like, he really can't do much to consider the source in most of these situations, I feel like. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of just like going off.
You're right about that. That's an interesting thing that he wrote that on there, "consider the source," because he should know that. I mean, one of his other tattoos says "don't trust," and he knows that his memory is horrible. So it's interesting for him to even put as a tattoo "consider the source," because in theory he shouldn't trust any source, I guess. But so it's an odd. I mean, you wonder if some of these tattoos were done, what frame of mind, different types of frame of minds he went when he had them. Like, were some of them done when he had only remembered things 20 minutes before? Were some of them done when he had like a full day of remembering things and what was going on when he chose to do certain tattoos, because that one to me is a weird one.
Again, it seems like an older one where the lower line, the memory is treachery, is more of an afterthought. And that one, it especially is with how thin the letters are, that looks like one that he possibly did himself.
Mm.
And then the next one that we see, and we get this great POV shot, and I think it's very important too, the fact that we do have this POV shot with the him looking down at his chest and sees the photograph house, car, friend, foe. Because the important part of this POV shot is this really shows his perspective and him looking down at his chest. He does not see the big collar tattoo, the mirrored, the reversed collar tattoo, because that's a little bit too close. And, he might be able to see like just blurry edges of it, but it's positioned in such a way that he's not able to read it just by looking down at his own chest. He has to be looking into a mirror.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that the mirrored notes, the mirrored tattoo says, is that because you get the impression that's something he knows, even though it's after his injury. Like, it's something that every time he resets, he basically knows that information, which is kind of interesting.
Well, from my understanding is he knows that he and his wife were attacked, but he doesn't know that she's dead. Like, he has to be reminded that she's dead.
Right.
At every point in time. And of course, there's also the theory that, maybe she's not dead. And that, maybe she left him, and the whole Sammy Jankis story is actually based on his own life.
Mm.
Have you heard that theory before, Chris?
No, is that like a theory that viewers have, that she's not dead?
It's something that is presented as a possibility in the commentary track, actually, and it
really?
is something in viewers that viewers have theorized, that the whole insulin trick. She went into a coma, but then she and I think at the final scene, Teddy implies that she's not dead.
Man, see, I somehow I didn't pick up on that.
I didn't either.
Pretty bad.
I always figured she definitely was dead. Whether it was the Sammy Jankis insulin story, I thought that she was definitely dead. I've never even considered that she might actually be alive and have just left him.
Yeah, and then the next one I have on the don't trust, and I think it's interesting that the way it's framed, because as we see it looks like it says don't trust your weakness. But then he moves his hand and you see that there's another word, and we don't see it in this scene, but the other word is hide your weakness. and I just realized as I'm saying it out loud right now that he's actually hiding the word hide with his hands. And again, this is one that's done, that it looks like it was done in 2 different sessions.
Definitely.
Even though the handwriting, like the font is very similar, but the don't trust is in bold, and the hide your weakness is a slightly different font. So it definitely seems like it was done in 2 different sessions. And again, I would imagine that the don't trust happened first.
Yeah.
And then we also have the group, it actually starts with the in cursive, the buy film, which I like that. And then the camera doesn't lie, notes can be lost, habit and routine, learn by repetition. And then there's also another one that you can kind of see whenever he starts to pull down his pants, the I'm no different. And I think that one's interesting. Like, what do you think he's trying to tell himself with the tattoo I'm no different?
My first instinct is that he would be telling himself that he can still kind of get by in society and like kind of function despite the limitation he has. But other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I pretty similar to what Chris saying, like that. I'm not a different person than I was before I had this horrible thing happen to me where I lost my memory. I'm still the same person. I just have a crappy memory.
Yeah. And yeah, I think I skipped over in my notes, but there's also the condition yourself, which is right below the photograph house car, friend foe. And again, that's upside down. And then like right below his belly button in big bold block letters is eat, which I think that is funny, for multiple reasons. I like, do you think that that's kind of a possibly like a sex joke too?
I don't think so, and here's the reason why. My one of my grandmothers in her last few months before she died, had she had a brain tumor, so her short-term memory was completely shot, and she would literally forget that she had eaten. And like it would have been 20-30 minutes ago, and she'd be like, "Oh, I have to eat now," and her handler would say, "No, you just ate a half hour ago." "Oh, I did? Oh, okay." I think he literally will not remember whether or not he's eaten, and so he's got to look at the eat. Oh, wait, wait, my stomach feels full. I'm not hungry. I must have just eaten. Okay, I don't need to eat right now. I think it's more of a thing of just letting him remember, do I need to eat? Do I not need to eat?
Yeah, I think because every time he kind of resets, he's always trying to get his bearings and look for clues and figure out what he's doing. So I think that probably is, like you said, kind of just something like, oh, you need to kind of check in with yourself and make sure you also do that because you might be preoccupied. Although I don't know how often you're going to see that. I guess when he's going to the bathroom, maybe. I don't know. So, yeah, I don't know how efficient that is.
Yeah, even in the diner earlier in this scene, right? We don't know, and he doesn't know. Am I just getting to this diner and I'm about to eat, or am I about to leave because I already finished eating?
Right.
Yeah. And then we get to the facts, and I have them written in the order that we see them in this, because first he sees the ones on his thigh, the fact 5 drug dealer, and the fact 6 the car license number. And then he starts double checking one starting from the beginning with the with Teddy's information. The fact 1 male, fact 2 white, fact 3 first name John, and then in a different font is or James. And as we learn later, that the or James is probably something that Teddy planted in order to get him to go after somebody before Jimmy.
Yep. It's interesting that he doesn't put all the facts kind of in one place. Like maybe that's just a movie thing, but it's interesting he doesn't kind of have that in a centralized, easily accessible kind of like place he can add to. Like maybe, just they're kind of scattered.
Yeah, I mean maybe did he run out of arm? In facts 1, 2 or is it 1 and 2 are on the left arm and 3 and 4 are on the right arm? It zooms in, so it's hard for me to tell.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3 are, or no, 1 and 2 are on the first, are on his left forearm, and then 3 and 4 are on his right forearm.
Okay, yeah. So maybe once you would have gotten past 2 facts on your arm, you have to pull your sleeve up too far.
Right.
I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a reason why, but it does seem like putting all 6 facts on one arm. At that point, fact 6 is going to be up near your shoulder, and he's not going to see it that often. But you're right. Putting 5 and 6 on his leg, if he's usually wearing pants, that's kind of tough.
Yeah, I think he's thinking cinematically. I don't think he's, you could save space by, making the font smaller and all that, but I guess it's got to be a cool shot for the movie.
Yeah, and this is really like one of the big important scenes in this first act, because this is where he's putting all these clues together to point to Teddy.
Right.
And I think that it's notable that even though he has the biggest tattoo, the find him and kill him, he initially just writes down he is the one. And then as he starts to put his shirt back on, he looks in the mirror, and then he sees the mirrored collar tattoo that John G. raped and murdered my wife. And just this really cold, grim, determined look on his face, really tells you a lot about who Leonard is at this point in time. And he goes and writes "kill him," and then he loads his gun. Or technically loads Dodd's gun, I believe, that he currently has.
Yeah, cold is the best way to describe it. I mean, he's just like, it's so, I don't know, I almost get like an adrenaline, like an adrenaline rush, like for him, like he's just like almost like is amped up, that he's like, he thinks at this moment, he thinks he's found the person, and he's like all about it, all ready to do it.
Yeah, look at the way that it's even written. That it says don't believe his lies, and then under it we just saw him write he is the run, and now he's writing kill him, and he's not writing it in a harried way. He's not writing it in an angry or emotional way. It's the same exact writing as he wrote the other sentences, just a very methodical, calm way.
Very matter of fact.
Yeah, very matter of fact. Very just like the writing's neat. I mean, you would think maybe his adrenaline might be pumping, or his heart might be pumping, or he'd be worked up or something. So the writing maybe would be a little sloppier. But it's just it's very just it's him. I will kill him.
Yep.
Boom. And even I think that ties into something I noticed about this shot. So when he sees he puts it all together. You see the tattoo, John G. raped and murdered my wife. There's this very high-pitched music that starts, and it starts when he first notices the tattoo, and it sort of stays that same high-pitched music throughout the entire shot of him noticing the tattoo, of him deciding what he's going to do, of him taking out the photo, of him writing it down. A lot of movies I think you would expect as he writes the words "kill me," there'd be a change to that music cue. This is sort of, dun, dun, dun kind of thing or something like that. And it's not. It stays exactly the same because he's in this very straightforward, methodical frame of mind that's not changing as he's coming to the decision to write the words, kill him on the photo.
And something else that I noticed, that at least I think that I noticed as I was, kind of watching this moment quickly, is I do feel like it's extremely subtle, but I do think that whenever he's looking in the mirror and reading the words, that you can kind of see his breathing gets just a little bit faster and a little bit deeper for like 2 or 3 breaths, and then he calms himself down as he backs away from the mirror and goes to write down the words. So it's like you do get this, just extremely subtle bit of emotion from him. But for the most part, it is very calm and methodical. It's almost, it's something that we learn by the end of the movie. It almost feels like a serial killer, which is basically what he's become without even realizing it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
But that's all the notes that I have for this scene. Do either of you have anything else?
I had one other that with some of the tattoos from before. I thought it was very interesting. The 3 notes, by film, camera doesn't lie, notes can be lost. I found it interesting that all 3 were in 3 completely different fonts. So obviously all 3 of those notes were tattooed at 3 different times. Obviously he's had some trouble. He probably used to just take notes and probably lost them, and that caused problems for him. So he started taking pictures instead, because camera doesn't lie. And then probably at some point he ran out of film, so he couldn't take pictures, and that probably screwed something up for him. So then he goes and tattoos by film. So it was like this natural progression of he kept screwing up and kept having to add tattoos in that group there of how to keep track of his life and how to keep track of what he's doing to avoid future screw-ups.
Yeah, and that's also another connection to Sammy Jankis, because he talks about how Sammy Jankis used to write notes all the time, but he would get them all mixed up. And so this is another connection between him and Sammy Jankis. And you could, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but the I'm No Different could also compare him to Sammy Jankis.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you for Chris for joining us today and joining us on your first podcast. I think you did pretty well.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. I would say it was probably my best one and also my worst one I've ever done. So we'll see how the future goes.
And we will actually have you back in 2 weeks for the 11th scene, because I feel like it connected better to this one, and then the Natalie scenes connected with each other a little bit better. We will talk to you again in just a couple weeks. And thank you, Eric, again for being my co-host in this journey. And for everybody else listening at home, my name is Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter where I'm at Bubbawheat. And you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. And you can join that and discuss episodes as they come out. You can also have discussions about other time loop properties out there. And you can also, be informed of what movies and TV shows we're going to be covering in future seasons. And until next time, have I told you about Memento?
Every single time.
John Edward Gamble. This guy told me his name was Teddy.